Right, so it's a couple of minutes past 10. We will get started now, and I'm sure some other people will be joining us as the presentation progresses. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. A couple of familiar faces and some which are new. So it's really good to have you join us this morning. So we will be focusing today basically just trying to give you a bit of information about how companies can work with the University of Salford and university in general. We will focus around two main kind of streams in which companies engage with the university. Firstly, we will look at knowledge transfer partnerships, and secondly, we will look at industrial PhD, our industrial PhD program. So just a little bit about us. So my name is Richard McGuinness. I'm a business engagement manager at the University of Salford. Our team is tasked with engaging with industry externally and trying to get them involved in the work that we do and getting them to access the knowledge and expertise at the university.
Richard, really sorry to interrupt. I don't seem to have permission to let people in, so there's a couple of people waiting in the lobby. If you wouldn't mind just letting them in.
Yeah, I will keep doing that. Thank you.
Thanks sorry about that. I don't seem to have
permission. Thank you. I will keep an eye on that. Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, so basically, our team is kind of the front door for industry to the university, and we help companies innovate using in the expertise at the university. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Imran Mushtaq from Innovate UK, Professor Paul Comfort, Dr. Matthew Cuthbert, and Dr. John McMahon. So I will just quickly go around the table and just the virtual table and ask each of them to introduce themselves and kind of what they'll be talking a little bit about today. So over to you, Professor Paul Comfort.
Hi everyone, so I'm Paul Comfort. As Richard's just said, I'm a professor of strength and conditioning at the university, and we've had a series of different PhDs, one which Matt was involved in as a student, funded through the Football Association where he's now employed, another one with Hawking Dynamics, which is why John McMahon's on the call, and we've got a series of others also about to start as well, and they've all run successfully, which is great. So I'll be giving you a bit of insight into how those iPhDs run.
Thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Matt Cuthbert, physical performance coach. So I've gone through sort of the strength and conditioning pathway from an undergrad, master's, and then from a funded PhD perspective. So was fortunate enough to be awarded the opportunity to do a industrial PhD that was funded by the Football Association. I work on the women's side, so team I work with primarily is the women's under 23s, but I also then manage the performance provision from under 19s down. So yeah, that's my current job role.
Thank you. John?
Good morning, everyone. I'm John McMahon. I'm the Director of Innovation at Hawking Dynamics. I'm talking on behalf of the company, I suppose. So we're a wireless force measurement company, and I recognise that probably means nothing to most people on the call. So it's just one aspect of biomechanical assessment of the human body. We provide products and the software to assess people across in education, sports, clinical, and military sectors. I was formerly at the University of Salford until as recently as December 2023. So I've experienced industry. Sorry, I can hear myself.
Sorry. Could I ask? It might be me. Go on.
Oh, is it you, Richard? Oh, there we go. That's better. All right. No worries. I was just checking that wasn't coming through strange for you. I was just saying I've experienced this industry PhD from both being a supervisor of a student and also being on the company side as well. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that today. And we're a small business. We've got 50 employees, about 2,000 customers globally, just to give you an idea of roughly where we're at as a company right now.
Thank you. And Imrana?
Good morning, all. My name is Imran Mushtaq, and I am the Knowledge Transfer Advisor at Innovate UK. My background is heavily science and technology, and I took this role with Innovate UK, I think approximately 2 years ago. So lovely to meet you all this morning.
Okay, thank you. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Yeah, if there's a fire alarm, no, I'm only joking. But if yes, so in terms of how we will run this, please just ask questions as you go along, as we go along, and my colleague Catherine will just interrupt, and we will try and answer them as we go through. I think we kind of keeps the flow of the presentation going a little better, but we'll also have Q&A at the end. In terms of yeah, so please feel free to write or put up your hand and we can bring you onto screen, whatever. So the idea is we keep it informal. I do have slides, but I'll try not to make it death by PowerPoint. So yeah, thank you. So just a little bit about kind of some of the outcomes today. Firstly, we want to explain a little bit about where do you start the university? How do you come into the university? And that's through our team. We obviously understand that universities are big beasts and there's a lot of different entry points. But we'll explain a little bit about kind of the best way through our team. We'll also explain a little bit about how we work with companies. We'll look very briefly at the kind of range of engagement streams, but we'll be focusing on knowledge transfer partnerships and also in industrial PhDs. And then at the end, Imran will share some best practices from the kind of funders perspective from Innovate UK for the knowledge transfer partnership side. And yeah, so just a little bit about our team. Yes, sorry, we actually don't have a photo of all four of us, despite having worked together for a while. So yeah, this is basically the business engagement team. We are out and about all throughout Greater Manchester and beyond. And the role of our team is basically to come and speak with businesses and understand the challenges that they're facing that are kind of hindering growth, and looking at how we can link them into funding streams in order to develop solutions to those issues. It might not be an issue. It might just be that a company is looking to develop a new line of products, but actually they're missing some knowledge in order to take it to the next level. So yeah, apart from that, we try to get our academics onto panels and explain and get the message out there to the public and to the companies about how they can work with the university. So we're not actually based within any school. We're based in kind of the, let's say, the central government, if we're going to call it that, but it's not, it's the centrally based unit. And that means that we're well placed to make sure that we're pulling in different academics from different disciplines as is required for the project. So a little bit about about how we work with companies. So we help them develop new products and services. Companies may have something that they're developing, but they need to test it and trial it. So we have a lot of facilities for that. Of course, as we explained today, we also can help you access funding. That could be funding, place-based funding within a certain area. So for example, Greater Manchester, but a lot of streams, for example, with Innovate UK are national and nationwide. We can develop solutions to your problems through working as kind of consultants, and that's all costed out using a universal cost card at the university. So we don't have a key agenda when it comes to working with companies. We want what's best for the company, and also it has to be, of course, of interest internally to the academic members of staff. Yeah, that's basically our mission. So we want to help companies grow, become more sustainable. We want to be able to deliver training wherever possible, and also conduct research on behalf of companies to plug those knowledge gaps. So how do we do this? So these are the Greater Manchester frontier sectors, but we also kind of we've linked them back into the university. And basically the point I'm making here is that, let's say we have a company that's looking to develop a sustainable solution, but it involves automation. Then we would work between experts in sustainability with experts in automation, potentially robotics. Depends on the project. So the point here is that we pull in different knowledge pools in order to deliver a solution. And I think that this is really where a university has a massive advantage, just because we have 1,500 academics working across different areas, some very niche as well. So the different engagement streams, As I said, we can do work as consultants or commercial testing, but some of the main ones are kind of knowledge transfer partnerships, which I'm going to take a deep dive into this morning, contract research, industrial PhDs, which I will also kind of go into some detail about later, bespoke training. Students can lead on small consultancy projects. If you're a small company and you're on the call, we have specialist funded or part funded programs through our Centre for Sustainable Innovation. And yeah, we can act as an academic partner and a research and development funding bid as well. So going to have a look at it. So firstly, what is a knowledge transfer partnership? Now, some of you may have heard about it, some may not have. So knowledge transfer partnership is a three-way partnership between a group of academics, so the university, an organization that has a challenge or a strategic goal that they want to meet, and then also a graduate, which is what we would call a KTP associate that is hired specifically to deliver alongside your members of staff on that project. And it can be for a company of pretty much any size, sector, profit, for-profit or non-profit. But what has to unify all of them is that it has to bring about a it has to be about bringing transformative change in a core strategic area to your business. Okay, so how does this work? So yeah, it's company driven. So as I said, it's not us trying to push research onto a company. We look at it from, we flip it the other way around. Basically, we consult with the company, they drive the requirement. And these are strategic projects that last between 12 and 36 months. On average, I would say probably 2 years. And as we lay it out, there are set deliverables which are carried forward throughout those throughout that time period. Now, in terms of there'll be companies of all different sizes on this call. If you're a large company, it's 50% funded by Innovate UK, 67% funded if you're an SME, and 75% funded if you're a non-profit. And basically, it's jointly supervised. So there'll be somebody within the company that is working, that is their kind of point of contact, their liaison, and then also there'll be the academic team internally, which is channeling their knowledge to the associate and embedding it within your company. And you get roughly around 10% of the academic's time per week. If there's several supervisors, that is split. And as we'll hear from kind of Matt and John, whilst they did the iPhD program, they did have links as the ones delivering the projects through the iPhD program. And in bring this back to the KTP, many of the associates actually go back on to continue working for the company, and that's around 60% actually. So something about the KTPs at Salford, it's not something new. So we've delivered over 275. We actually delivered the first one ever across the UK in 1975. And because we manage the applications internally, which I'll explain more about in a second, we have a 95% success rate with the submissions. In fact, that's actually even higher now. It's around 97%. And actually, in the round that's just passed, we submitted 5 projects with 5 different companies, and we have another 2 or 3 going through for November and others going through for January next year. So now I kind of want to look at it from different viewpoints. So as I mentioned, it's a 3-way partnership, and I don't want to just talk about it from kind of my perspective. I also, and it's the reason why we've invited Matt, John, and Paul to kind of share their perspectives. But I will just to start. So, from the academic team, it's really important that obviously our research is applied to the real world, and that research and knowledge is being shared with companies, and that companies are using it in order to grow and innovate. From the university perspective, we developed a strategic long-term relationship with the company, and I'm not going to go through and explain about how. Oh, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Basil, I will get to that in a second about the IP It's in one of the other slides coming up, but thank you for that. I'm not going to go through and explain what these acronyms mean, but in essence, the university is scored on how much we engage externally with industry, which is turned into a fund, which is given to us by central government, which then allows us to produce more research. And also, by working together with industry, we can come up with new research themes. So I would like to just ask Paul if you would be able to add kind of a few comments around this. Sorry, I'm just scrambling for this. So firstly, could you just explain a little bit about kind of the projects you worked on with Matt and John and kind of what the objectives were for the company, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. So the first one that we did with Matt's PhD was with the Football Association, where they wanted to investigate different training solutions for when they're on camps and they have very congested periods of competition. You know, they're competing every few days. They wanted to know how they can actually train individuals to make sure they don't detrain, but also to make sure that they don't end up fatigued going into the subsequent game. And what we did is sat down with Martin Evans, who's now Matt's boss, who's quite high up at the FA, and had a discussion over what can this look like? How can we put this together? So are there specific aspects to those questions that you have some information on? Are there specific aspects that are more important than others? And then we worked together over multiple iterations to try and come up with a solution to those sort of periods of fixture congestion and how they could train, answering very, very specific questions, which again have been revised multiple times. It had gone back to the physical performance team, the medical staff, etc., to make sure it was covering all those different issues. And then it was similar with another PhD we had that John was a co-supervisor with me while he was at the university as a member of staff with Matt's PhD, but then also with Hawkin Dynamics that he's now working for. And that was a similar sort of thing, really. They needed to try and refine some of the testing procedures, data analysis procedures with the equipment that they offer, and also to come up with some, well, what's normal performance when you're using these tests using force plates. So it needed all of that data generated because it wasn't there at that point in time. So again, that was a case of going through a series of iterations. John actually led on that part of it first before he was working with the company, to say, well, these are the things that we can do. And I think the key thing is with that is making sure that it is a two-way conversation. We've been really honest in the past and said that's not possible. That would take 10, 15 years for us to generate that data, which we can work towards, but it's not going to be done in a KTP or an IPhD. And then just refining that process and having a very honest and open relationship with the industrial partner to make sure that everything is achievable and manageable. And so far, that's all gone really smoothly.
And, you know, what were the outcomes then?
So with Matt's PhD, it was great. We looked at what's referred to as microdosing. You might have also heard of it as exercise snacking, where you do a small bit of activity and subdivide the normal workload you would do in a training week into much smaller parts, so that you still get a stimulus for training, but you don't induce fatigue in the same way you might normally. And that's turned out pretty successful, not just with how it can be used within the Football Association, but within sporting organisations whenever there is fixture congestion and they're competing very frequently. It's also been used in the military, etc. as well. With the PhD with Hawkin Dynamics, we generated a whole load of normative data for academy and professional football, with senior players as well, to identify, well, these are the benchmarks, these are the normal standards which we would be expecting at this level of competition. This is, you know, going from poor to excellent, so that people can then benchmark their athletes' performances against that, along with a range of other different aspects that we looked at in terms of how reliable and valid both the hardware and the software was as well.
And so I think you've already touched on it a little bit, but perhaps you could just mention a little bit more about how the touch point, like, you know, what were the touch points with the company, how often, how did that work in terms of the communication between the three partners in, you know, the academic side, obviously the PhD student and also the company.
So initially, we got approached by the different companies and had some relationships with them anyway, and then the sort of iPhDs just developed from there. Once they were running, you have regular, normally about every 3 months, you have a formal meeting with somebody from the Knowledge Transfer Partnership Office, sort of leading that, and then it's normally the industrial supervisor plus the academic supervisors and the student presents and gives feedback on that. Now, in each of those situations as well, if we use Matt's as an example, because Matt was then working multiple days across the year for the Football Association as a physical performance coach for one of the younger age groups, he was still going into Football Association based at St George's Park, normally once a week, and then would also have regular communication with Martin Evans. It was his industrial supervisor, and that works really well because it upskills the PhD student into what the job role might be and what the industrial partner is doing, but also gives you a really strong link with them, so there can be continuous communication and conversations between those individuals. And we've certainly found when that happens and there is that regular communication, that tends to work more effectively than if the PhD student is just going into the organisation sporadically, every few months. Having that sort of touch point almost on a weekly basis or every 2 weeks is definitely really useful for keeping that relationship going and making sure the partner is fully aware of exactly what's happening.
Perfect. Thank you so much, John. So now we will move on to look at kind of the KTP Associate. And as I mentioned, Matt and John delivered on an iPhD, but it's more about understanding kind of a little bit how it works, between the university and some of the challenges they faced and etc. So just before I kind of speak with John and Matt, I'm just going to explain a little bit about kind of how it works with the KTP Associate. So they are hired specifically for the project. And you as a company can get as involved in that process as you want. We lead on it. We lead on the hiring process for the associate. We do the marketing. If you're based, let's say, in Kent, and it's clear that actually the knowledge transfer partnership will need to have physical face-to-face touch points, then we can hire locally for that as well. And, for the ones that we've had over the past, like the past year or so, we've had quite a good number of applicants. We had one for the company called TP Transcriptions, which went in earlier on this year. We had over 200 people apply for that. So we usually get a good pool. The job description is pulled together using the exact requirements and expertise that are needed for the role. You can get involved in the shortlisting. You can get involved just in the interview process, which can also be done remotely. You decide how involved you get in that process. The Knowledge Transfer Partnership, the KTP Associate gets paid. That's embedded into the costs of the Knowledge Transfer Partnership. They obviously get to expand their professional networks. They get to learn from the academic experts and how that works in a real life setting, embedding that knowledge into the company. And as I mentioned before, around 60% actually go on to work with their industry partner. I mean, if you imagine that they are delivering on a new application for your company, then if they've built it, who's better to keep that updated as you move forward. So often companies want to retain the skills and knowledge that have been developed throughout the project, obviously project management skills, and they get a training budget of up to £2,000 per year, which is also embedded into the costs of a KTP. So just on that point, I would like to have, I'd like to start with Matt. So if you could just remind us quickly about which project you worked on and your kind of involvement in that, and kind of your experience working on the projects with Salford, please.
Yeah, so I guess just to really quickly go over what our objectives were. I guess, as you mentioned at the beginning, there's always a core strategic target from the organisation point of view. It might sound daft, but our core strategic target is winning major tournaments within our technical directorate. And as a part of that, major tournaments, I guess the challenges that we end up facing throughout is the fixture congestion. So when it comes to sort of our youth teams, the average camp that we go on is about 10 days, but we usually play 3 games in 7. So they'll have 2 days in between each fixture. Once they get to a major tournament, then if you go the full way, depending on the tournament, it's 6 to 7 games, again within sort of a 21-ish to like 31-day period. So the fixtures come thick and fast, and because of the major tournaments being anywhere from like 4 to 6 weeks in terms of how long we're with them, there's the potential based off players' sort of physiology that they can detrain within that time. I mean, there's some physiological adaptations that will start detraining within a couple of weeks. So even within that 10-day camp window, that can occur. So we need to keep applying off-pitch training, so particularly in the gym, as well as making sure that the on-pitch training is appropriate to manage fatigue, but also to make sure that players don't detrain. And when we send them back to their clubs, they don't go back in a worse state to then go into sort of probably a busy fixture schedule from a league perspective. So that's the challenge that we were looking to try and face. We wanted to look at microdosing of resistance training, which is influenced by the concept of microdosing in other areas as well. So again, as Paul said, like almost like that exercise snacking of just dividing a total training load into small repeated bouts throughout the tournament. So that's what we looked at. We actually found that provided the amount of training is exactly the same, it doesn't matter how much it was distributed. So that was sort of the conclusions. And as a result, I guess, going into how it's influenced our practice, both on the men's and the women's side, is that we're able to, it basically changed our whole training practice each day. So prior to going out on the pitch, rather than the players just doing their like typical warm-up as you might have done growing up in school in PE, where you just increase the intensity up until the football starts, we now get them in the gym prior to going out on the grass. And more often than not, as a result, because they're doing some high intensity work off the pitch, when they get onto the pitch, they're able to start the football straight away rather than, again, going through a like classic warm-up, which means you get a greater intensity first up. From that perspective. And it's changed our whole practice, which has been relatively successful, with the women's obviously winning the Euros the last couple of times around now, and the men's getting to the latter stages of tournaments for, again, the last few major tournaments we've had.
Okay. And I mean, taking yourself back to when you were doing the PhD, what were some of the challenges that you faced? And I mean, in a 3.5-4 year project, surely not everything went to plan, and kind of, were there certain challenges? How did you kind of, how did you go about come up with a solution for those challenges?
Yeah, so I guess there was a couple of project specific challenges that came up. We don't have access to players when we're not on camp. And what we were wanting to do was look longitudinally about how this training program or approach to training has an effect longer term. So the challenges around that was then getting access to data, access to players for a longer period of time. So the importance of creating a network or connections beyond just the FA was important. So we ended up using a couple of teams, one based at Man United with the women's. We used Crewe Alexandra, so like local to the Northwest. Allow us to perform the testing and perform the programs over that longitudinal time. So creating connections beyond just, I guess, the 3 elements you've got on the screen there was important. So that was one key challenge. Other key challenge came up around just COVID. I've done it through COVID, and having to then adapt and be both remote from a university standpoint and from the FA presented challenges. But we were able to work again with the regular meetings that Paul mentioned. We had them quarterly. They were really efficient, really well planned out. And I guess that we didn't necessarily experience loads of challenges that some of the projects may have, but I think that was as a result of sort of the clearly laid out roadmaps that Paul and then my industrial supervisor Martin had done prior to the project. So I guess research isn't always smooth. It doesn't always go to plan because you end up finding things out that you never expect to come up, or what you expect to come up just might not come to fruition. So there's always adaptations. There's always changes to that roadmap. But because it was clearly structured, there was a plan, there was timelines for the deliverables. I think it really helped that if there was any changes, and because of the regular touch points, we were able to make some really quick decisions to adapt to something that benefited both us and the university as well.
Super, thank you so much. So now I will go on to talk a little bit about the benefits from an industry partner perspective, and this is where I'll be pulling in John, who does kind of sit between the academic side and obviously an industry partner. So John used to work as an academic at university and is still closely linked with the university, but also is in his role at Hawkins Dynamics. So just kind of looking at it from, before we kind of hear it from John's perspective, just looking at some of the benefits for industry. So really it is kind of a cost-effective kind of solution. And if you look, we will look at the costs in a few slides time. It also brings about wider benefits for the university. It provides, so the associate provides additional capacity. So you could be an SME, and there may be 10 of you working within the company. In order to get somebody to deliver something that's core to a strategic aim and need of your company and sit alongside, that one extra member of staff does make a huge difference. Similarly, if you're a large company and you have like a dedicated R&D team, or some SMEs that are innovative also have R&D teams, but this person can sit alongside and complement the existing knowledge and expertise within your company in the R&D team. Basil, over to your question about kind of how the intellectual property works. So for a KTP, the IP is retained by the foreground IP is retained by the company. So the background IP is the knowledge, the academics and the associates' knowledge going into the project, which helps provide the solution. But any new knowledge which is created as a result of the project is retained by the company. We understand that if companies wanted to, companies would not get involved in these projects if that wasn't. It would be a game changer. So the knowledge and skills are embedded into the business. So let's say we were working together to develop a new way of working. We wouldn't just give you a report and say, here you go and sort it out, because actually a huge number of change management projects fail because they're not embedded into the company. So we will look at how to embed it into the processes, into the staff, the skills that you need in order to embed your new capabilities into your company. We can also help provide routes to market. Obviously, as a university, we have extremely strong links in many, many different areas, internationally and within the UK. You get to access the latest knowledge and research. So that's kind of channeled through the associates from the academic team. As part of the first step in the knowledge transfer partnership process, we have to prove that it's going to add value to your business. And that could be in a social aspect, environmental, but more often than not, it's about creating efficiencies and increased growth within your company. And many companies also say that their products and services have become more competitive, and that also it's developed a culture of innovation. But I want to just kind of stop there because I want to ask, John, I guess feel free to answer from both the academic and industry partner perspective. But yeah, maybe just explain a little bit kind of firstly, if you could just give a quick line about the project and explain about how it's benefited the company, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of context, this was started in May 21, like industry PhD through to 24. I'll talk because Paul already spoke about the perspective of the academic side. Obviously, I was in that camp at the time, but from the company perspective, the plan really was threefold. Firstly, to validate our flagship product. We produced the first wireless version of the force plates, which are now kind of a market standard. But we wanted to partner with Salford University, who had expertise, both myself and Paul, in that area, to help build consumer trust in the product and obviously to drive more sales. If we're being frank about it, it was the initial tactic there, just to try and have the validation, but also for us to find out if there's any improvements that were needed to the product. For us then to obviously innovate and change some things. That wasn't required in the end. The validation study came out really well. Secondly, it was to generate research-informed use cases in professional football as the highest global impact sport. And again, then link that back into give the data that Paul mentioned on a large scale to inform our customers that work in football on what are some of the benchmarks you might expect for some of the key assessments that you would do with our tech when working in both academy and elite men's football. But then also, again, to help us increase our market share within that football space through collaborating in what is effectively a two-way relationship, isn't it, with the research that's being generated by the Salford University in this case, through the publications that then come as a consequence of that, of which I can't remember now, Paul, maybe there were 4 or 5 published papers along the way. And all of that obviously then is something that our marketing team were able to make really great use of, then going outbound to football clubs globally to showcase not only that our product is being used in football, but also we have some really cool research that's come out through the University of Salford in engaging in this industry PhD, again, to help build trust, to help practitioners understand which tests are possibly most effective for people in roles like Matt's, and also which direction they can take then in terms of trying to apply that to rehabilitating their players from any musculoskeletal injuries, using it for fatigue monitoring during periods of congestion, like Matt's projects encompassed. And ultimately for us as a company, again, just to have greater brand awareness in that space. And that's one of the key things through working with Salford, particularly when I was there, but also it's the same since I left as well. Part of this product part of the project was getting the product out to as many football clubs as possible in this large data capture. So in the end, actually, like a lot of clubs subsequently knew about Hawking Dynamics through academics and the PhD student actually actively going out to these different clubs. And we were able to replicate that in a parallel study that was going through La Liga teams out in Spain as well. So it's been a really positive experience. And for anyone that's maybe thinking about it, our market share in football has increased about 500% in the last 1.5 to 2 years since the project finished.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll just quickly go and explain about some of the other benefits that I couldn't really slot into one of the other slides. And I realized that time is creeping on. So as I mentioned, the KTP associate is embedded alongside your company. I think I've already mentioned some of these points. I mentioned that we actually take charge of the recruitment. So that takes, it takes quite a load off of the company. I said we can recruit outside of GM. And whether it's an IPhD or a knowledge transfer partnership, we understand that these are longish projects, but deliverables can be agreed upon through milestones throughout the project, so that you can kind of show value as the project is ongoing. And these will be agreed as we're kind of going through and looking and mapping out the scope of the project and the work plan. These are applicable to R&D tax credits as well. So you can get some rebates on that. And as I mentioned, that it can be a mix of remote and in person. It all depends on the project, and we take it on a case-by-case basis. So I think I've mentioned this already, but I will just fly through these. These are just some of the ways that, some of the most common ways that we work with industry on a knowledge transfer partnership, and in many cases, in some cases on industrial PhDs as well. And that basically it's looking at the development of new products or services, taking existing ones and ensuring that they're still fit for the market, improving them, looking at ways in which that they can be changed, or perhaps regulation is going to change down the line, which means you'll have to change your product. We've looked at many projects in kind of these fields, improving business processes. As you can imagine, we've had a lot of projects at the moment from companies across all different sectors, looking at embedding AI and automation, and looking to see how they can make the best of those efficiencies in those sorts of projects. We can help companies that perhaps, they've just bought 3 new pieces of kit, but they don't know how to embed it into their company. Then that's something that we can also do, and we can help you enter new markets. But there are many different other scenarios as well. So, look, I'm not going to go through this bit by bit, but it's just to kind of show you the different parts of the project, that there are different team members that support on these. So it's around a 6-month average from the first engagement discussion right through to submission. It can be less time, it can be more. It all depends on how quickly the communication is between the industry partner and the university. But the first port of call would be the business engagement team, which we will take you through, and we will create a business case on your behalf, which we will submit through to Alex or Alejandro, who's from our KTP team. And basically, they will work with you to get you a date and time with the knowledge transfer advisor, which is through Innovate UK, and they will Alex's team will work with you to develop the application until it's ready for submission, and then it's over to the company and the academic team once the funding has been awarded to deliver on the project. So in terms of the eligibility requirements, we say at Salford that you need to have a minimum of 5 employees and kind of 3 years of accounts, but you can be based anywhere across the UK. Ideally, we like working with slightly larger companies just because the challenges tend to be more complex, but we have also worked with companies that have a small number of employees that have an extremely innovative mindset and have a very interesting project. The finances generally needs to be through natural growth, but there are ways in which we can look at how funded projects through venture capital, angel investors or similar. It just might take a little longer to get that first part approved, but I will let Imran explain a little bit more about that. And in terms of looking at the costs, so the value in itself without the funding being applied is between £80,000 and £100,000, but with the funding applied, it comes out between £32,000 and £35,000 per year if you're an SME, and £45,000 to £50,000 if you're a large business. Now, the way that we always explain this is that, especially for the SMEs, you wouldn't be able to get somebody with such a high degree of knowledge. Most of the ones that go through a KTP that become a KTP associates are either they have a master's degree or a PhD, and of course, if it's through their PhD program, they will have to have some level of knowledge leading up to the PhD program. Of course, usually a master's degree there as well. And this basically buys out the time of our academics, any project consumables, the associate salary, all of the mentoring, training, and development. And any travel and subsistence that is required. It's all embedded into those costs, and it can be basically paid monthly. So we always say that, as I said, that's similar to just an additional salary, and they sit on our books. Actually, they aren't actually employed by the company. They just work alongside your company. They're actually employed by the university. So there is that element of financial risk which is taken off of the kind of shoulders of the company following the end of the project. Now, look, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's basically just to show you that these are on rolling. So the funding deadlines are rolling. There's around 4 or 5 per year. We hope to get the new date soon, but they're roughly around the same months each year. So the idea is that we are making sure that the application is ready for submission before making sure it's ready before we submit. And if it doesn't make a certain deadline, then we will submit it for the next one. Okay, so I'm going to fly through these now because I realize that time is running out, but I wanted to mention a little about iPhDs. So these are the projects that Matt, John and Paul have delivered on. Now, in the case of an iPhD, we tend to say that we look at the technology readiness level. So it tends to be more the generation of new knowledge, so more exploring new ideas and concepts. And these tend to be projects between 3.5 and 4 years, with a total costing between 120 and 130k, which when you split over the 4 years is roughly the same as a knowledge transfer partnership at the SME funding level. And yeah, it works very similar to a KTP. Of course, the associate gets a PhD out of it at the end. So I've kind of created just a little bit of a comparison here because I hope it explains a little bit how it's different. So as I said, like the industrial PhD is more on the focus of new knowledge, whereas the KTP is more about embedding and taking existing knowledge and embedding it into your company and your own business and really creating that business impact. As I've mentioned, kind of the lengths differ. An industrial PhD is longer, whereas the KTP tends to be shorter in length. The industrial PhD can start at the start of any term, and the KTP, it all depends on the process and the submission date. And once we have the KTP associate hired, the focus of an industrial PhD tends to be kind of the development of technical knowledge and cutting edge research, and kind of linking up with the academics in that sense, whereas the KTP is more about delivering the new products and embedding them directly into the business. And in terms of looking at the kind of the business time output, basically, it's to co-develop the research agenda and to support the student's industrial placement or project. And with a KTP, as I mentioned, it's about having that person on the ground in the company that is giving information about the company and that context so that the project is being delivered and embedded as it goes along. Now, I'm not going to go through these because I will share these slides afterwards. But I wanted to go on to kind of Imrana. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Imrana Mushtaq, who's from Innovate UK, who will explain a little bit more about the funder's perspective. So Imrana, and just let me know, and I can change the slides for you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. That was a very comprehensive overview of the KTP programme. And thank you to Paul, Matt and John. I really found those insights interesting. It appears I can only have mic and not camera at the same time because I was cheering there, Matt, when you mentioned the women's football team. So really pleased there. So that was fantastic. As one of the advisors at Innovate UK, I would like to further expand just a little bit on the programme. I'd like to really begin by sharing that KTP will be celebrating its 50th anniversary at the end of this month. So it really is an honour to be part of the achievements and success that KTP has been instrumental for businesses across the UK, knowledge institutions, and of course the individuals who have been involved in carrying out the project. I think we can move to the next slide. Thanks, Richard. So at Innovate UK, we strongly believe that partnerships are important, allowing for the sharing of skills, accessing new expertise, working with the academic teams across universities to help businesses bridge gaps in knowledge and grow in areas that may otherwise they would have found challenging. So as Richard had mentioned really in detail, it really is a unique partnership between an academic team, the associate who is employed by the university, seconded into the business to deliver the business objectives, and of course the business partner. So the benefits, I've shared a number of significant benefits, and so did Richard. So really, collaborations like KTP, I just want to share huge benefits, such as increased innovation and creativity. And the programme really allows for the pooling of that collective knowledge and expertise to solve the complex problems that many businesses and industries are facing today. And it's really important that we segregate what those benefits are. And I won't read through all of them, so that each one of those partners who are part of this unique triangle, as I like to call it, understand really the expectations and really what they will also gain from the programme. Thank you, Richard. So we are a team of 40 advisors present across the UK to specifically support and champion the KTP programme Innovate UK, and of course to support businesses and knowledge bases to ensure all areas of the country have the opportunity to get involved with KTP. So gosh, I think we're pretty much located in every city, Scotland, Ireland, across the UK there. And just a couple of other points, I think, just to mention, a big part of the knowledge transfer advisor's role is also to provide mentoring for the associate to help them through that journey and to deliver that project. Thank you, Richard. I always like to make the figure of 50 million very large. With a budget of 50 million, it really allows Innovate UK to identify and prioritise strategic business activities for growth in the UK and to continue to help drive a culture of innovation. The KTP programme is part of the government's industrial strategy, and the focus is on the 8 growth areas identified to have the greatest growth potential over the next decade. And you can really read more about them on our website and on gov.uk.
So if you go, yeah, you put them down. So you can keep doing it. If I keep...
Okay, please continue.
That's okay. So those 8 areas are quite important, because that is really what Innovate UK are now focusing on, and they are advanced manufacturing, clean energy industries, creative industries, defence, digital technologies, finance services, life sciences, and professional business services. So that's really a key update from Innovate UK. And then just to really share some numbers with you, current partnerships, 812, KB partners, 111. I think that figure again has increased. Current business partners that we're working with, or the figures from June 2024, 779. And I know there's an increase there. We're just waiting for new figures. Associate jobs created, 837. And current associates 591. And the reason why those 2 figures aren't the same is because some KTP projects are 2 associate and associate vacancies there, which is probably a plus and minus 10 figure there. Thank you, Richard. So the assessment process at Innovate UK predominantly looks at these 4 areas in detail: impact, innovation, challenge, and cohesiveness. And you will find these are the themes throughout the application, and of course our conversations to help build and submit a successful application, and all of the points that Richard touched upon. So these are those key areas, and as I say, you will see the questions across the application time and time again. And during the assessment process, the assessors are again focusing on all of these. So it's just to really give business partners and academics really an insight into what the Innovate UK assessors are looking for. Thank you, Richard. So really just a quick overview of the process and the timelines. As Richard mentioned, we would explore company ideas, and the teams at the various university institutions would link to relevant academics. We would develop what is called a fact-find form to really just understand what that innovation is. We would do our due diligence on the financial side of things. The teams at Salford University and other universities would then contact their local KTP advisor. We would set up a meeting and we would then work through the application and target a closed round. Once the application is submitted, there's approximately a 8 to 10 week assessment process period. If the application is successful, you will then receive a letter from Innovate UK, and Innovate UK provide a 9-month window for which to recruit an associate. Project delivery, as Richard mentioned, typically between 24 months and 36 months. So this is my last slide. I'm just looking at the clock there. And what makes a good KTP is really a question I get asked often by partners, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list, and there will be many other contributing factors, but certainly what I can share after managing 60 projects in the past 2 years is that there are 4 fundamental areas that are consistent for delivering a successful KTP. So the project must be strategically vital to the business long-term goals. Successful projects bring a step change in capability. Project management, so really under that umbrella, a clear plan and ongoing communication is important, as it would be for any internal project within an organisation. And of course, in this case, a successful associate who will be the main driver of the project. So this really brings me to the end of my slides, and thank you very much for your time. And I hope that the content today has given you some actionable takeaways.
Thank you, Imrana. Thank you. So yeah, now I guess we will go out to the attendees and ask if you have any questions. Yeah, feel free to either put up your hand or write in the chat, whichever works best for you. Yeah, so I'll just give you a few minutes. No? Yeah. Well, in that case, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I will share the recording and the slides with all those that have attended. Oh, I can see a question. Sorry. Yeah, so just to ask, so to answer Ivanova's question, it has to be led on by the company. So the company needs to be the one that's leading on the challenge, because in the end, it's the company that will need to put forward the funds in order to develop the idea. If it's an innovative idea that, yeah, you have another company, then yeah, happy to have a discussion and we can see kind of which, through which channel it might be, yeah, it might be best. So happy to have a chat if you want to drop me an email afterwards and we can have a look at that. What will the partnership be like in that instance? Yeah, so as I said, I think the best we have a chat about it, so please drop me an email afterwards and I'd love to hear more and I'll be able to make suggestions based around the case. And yes, okay, well, we will bring it to a close now. I think almost on time, which is shocking. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to Paul, Matt, John and Imrana, and also for Catherine in the background for supporting with the chat. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and thank you for listening. And yeah, I hope you have a good day. All right, thank you.